Hello, people. We're right here not in the studio today. We're right here in the beautiful continent of Africa, right here on the island of Zanzibar. So happy, so excited to be here. Couple days, great people, great network. I have John Okoro here today, who facilitated our coming. He brought a bunch of people from across the world to experience Zanzibar. It's been lots of activities, lots of fun. Yesterday, we also had a book reading session with people from diverse nationalities in the room. Met successful people that come from diasporans who have come from Asia, come from the UK, come from different parts of the world, and it was very, very exciting to meet such people. So we'll be going right down to it. I'll bring John to tell us what is seen in the continent, the kind of people he's meeting every day. While we're on the plane, we had, I would say, very big plane with over 80% as 80% white people in quotes. My question was, what were they seeing that was getting them to come in that number? And no better person than John, who is, I would call him an ambassador of Africa. He's doing an amazing job to promote the continent, and I believe that we'll learn so much from the wealth of experience that John had gathered over the years. So, John, tell me, what are you seeing across the continent? What's happening?
Thank you so much, Unity. It's good to have you in Zanzibar and visiting this beautiful island. If you look in front of me, you see beautiful trees, coconuts, palm, and right behind us, you can see that it's a beautiful, beautiful blue sea, turquoise waters. The other day we were on the sea just taking a ride, and it was just so calming.
Yeah.
I feel that we have a blend between not just nature, not just the trees, the fauna, the flora, but also great people is what puts Zanzibar aside and Africa in general. Hospitality is part of our culture. And that's also part of why, if you look at even the history of the continent, hospitality is the reason why we had this phase of colonialism. It's the fact that being welcoming, less apprehensive. There are even countries where people were even more pushed to make a negotiation because people do not believe in fighting. We're not prepared for wars. We lived in peace, right? Yeah. Africa is a very peaceful continent. Africa is very unique in that respect. Peaceful, welcoming, and as you mentioned in your plane, you had people from all over the world, especially people from North America, from Europe, from Asia. Africa is open for business, and this is showing. And Africa, increasingly, with what is going on now, we're seeing that a lot of policies around the world in other countries are becoming even much more restraining in different countries. We see what's going on in the United States, and that's going to set the pace for many countries. Europe is going to follow suit. A lot of countries are now looking at sort of closing their borders even more. And there's no better time for then Africans and other races or nationalities, depending on countries, to think about where else is the new frontier, or what are they missing out back home in quotes, or where can be the new home. And at the end of the day, we are citizens of the world.
True.
And no one should be limited to a single continent, a single policy, I think this is a blessing. I feel that I consider this a big blessing to have this privilege to be able to have the choice of different markets and jurisdictions. I think this is a big blessing, and I had a career in international business development for 10 years that gave me the opportunity to travel to more than 35 countries. So really, this opened a new vista, and the way I see the world, it really changed a lot, my world views. And that's part of why today I can be in Zanzibar and be Zanzibari. I can be in Kenya and be in Kenya. I can be in Burundi and be in Burundi. I can be in Nigeria and be in Nigeria. And I can also go to Canada and blend in. It's really this ability to see the world this way. I feel that we should not build bridges. We should not build fences, but build bridges. And that's really the way we can actually, even in our individual and collective communal lives, experience growth, togetherness, and growth. It's the Ubuntu culture. Absolutely. I think that's what Africa represents.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Just to piggyback to what I was saying about the kinds of people that we had in the book reading session yesterday. People talk about brain drain. A lot of people are leaving the continent, but there's a sense in which you have that brain gain and brain circulation, people going and coming and, looking to stay. One of the ladies in the room was from, I think she's a mental health practitioner from New Jersey. She said she's been here 2 months. She doesn't miss home or the United States, because of the tropical weather and all of that. You had someone who was a professor from Asia. She's been here 1 year now. I know it's a big leap to decide to move down this way, but for someone who is considering that sort of big life change, what would you say to them to help them make that decision?
Yes. It's really, sometimes you have to take the bull by the horn. I know this is being cliche. The question is how, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like a motivational, but I want to be very practical here. When you say we take the bull by the horn, what is that process of moving? I'm a family man as well, just like yourself, Unity, and moving is not just about one person. It's really also about, it's a family decision, collective decision. So one of the decisions I made, for instance, this year was I was going to travel with my family, bring them to East Africa. So Zanzibar, my family is here now with us, and they're also getting to experience it themselves. For many years, I've told them about what this looks like.
Now come see for
yourself.
Now
they see for themselves. And I can tell you, my kids don't want to go back. My wife is so at home. She's already asking me questions. Where can we rent or buy a bigger unit so we can have other families visit? So it's experiencing it actually makes a big, it happens first, because moving first happens within. And there's a great mind that said, it's a very popular philosophy, I think it was Lao Tzu, you cannot travel within and stand still without. So traveling, so experience starts first from within. So until that transformation happens, where coming to experience it and your mind gets to accept the idea first, and then the execution becomes easier, because then you've seen how you fit in. And that's the same thing about real estate, because when we move, we're moving into new spaces. And spaces is real estate, right? It's about location. And I'm sure also for yourself, Unity, coming here, you've now began to ask yourself, what else can I do here? You began to see the opportunity, because now you're on ground. It's different from seeing it from a brochure, from pictures. Now you see for yourself. Exactly. So I think it's the same thing about moving. The same thing about relocating is really first getting to take baby steps. And baby steps are exactly what we're doing. Coming, spending some time, doing this a couple of times, once or twice, 3 times, etc. Beginning to accept the idea, testing the waters. Yes. And it's not necessary that this could be for everyone. And I acknowledge that. So people may come and say, well, this is not my kind of place. And that's totally fine, actually. And for those who this looks like the kind of place you can come home, the next step will now be, okay, what practical steps? One of which would be obviously moving out of a place that is called home to another place to call home. Would also mean thinking about one's economic activities and how can you still sustain income? What is the cost of living? These are now practical steps of how to make that happen. Where will be the source of income, etc. And I also have another blessing of being an entrepreneur, just like Self-Unity, and we can actually through entrepreneurship develop new streams of income, plan that out, and then use that as a way to then plan and focus financing, but also look into new opportunities in the new area, because there's so much to do here. So much to do. I mean, you drive on the streets, you don't have street lights everywhere yet, so that's an opportunity. There's just so much to do. And an island has so many challenges that are opportunities that just exploring one alone is enough to. And that's exactly what we see here. This is the first big estate development in Zanzibar, and this has become a global renown, a global opportunity. It's the same in different other countries. I do a lot of work in Burundi, do a lot of work in Kenya, do a lot of all around the continent. Opportunities abound, and that's why perhaps it's not just about people traveling for tourism that the plane was full. I think there may be some people traveling for business because there's so much investment coming here in renewable energy, in tourism, in blue economy. It's going to be much bigger as we go ahead, and those opportunities need to be implemented by those who have already excelled in doing that elsewhere. And this, absolutely, this is why I see this as an opportunity, massive opportunity for the diaspora, for foreigners, come and invest, and to do this with a thinking of adding value to local economy, creating jobs. And that's what CPS has been able to do through Fumba Town, is also empowering people. The locals, and when people are empowered, locals are empowered. A lot of businesses can spring out of this, and there's a lot to do, and that creates a new experience entirely. So yes, moving is really baby steps, and then taking those decisions gradually, but practically planning out, also asking for people's experiences, to know the right place to live, to know the right place to opportunities to work. But they are massive opportunities that I can say with my own first-hand experience.
Amazing. Let's talk about intra-Africa movement. I know that you have a big volume of people coming from the West and outside the continent. But in terms of even, because I met someone who was saying, why go to Dubai when you have Dubai right here on the continent, But let's address what the challenges might be. From what you are seeing, is it easier to, say, for example, travel from Nigeria to Zanzibar than traveling from Nigeria for holidays, for example, to Dubai? Is it feasible? Are there direct flights, for example? What's the cost? Yeah, speak to that if you don't mind.
Yes, absolutely. There is a lot of progress that's been made in the last decade in terms of connecting cities, in terms of connecting people, transport, etc. My experience has been that this is increasingly becoming easier. It wasn't the case 10 years ago. It's increasingly becoming easier. Now we have Kenya making travels for Africans or entering to Kenya visa-free. That's a very big step. Ghana is moving in the same direction. A number of countries already, a couple of Rwanda has already done that. This is progress in terms of immigration, and this will also happen, I believe, very soon. Any country, and it's a question of the FOMO sort of trend, fear of missing out. Once a couple of countries do that, and Nigeria, for instance, South Africa, once a couple of countries jump in on the wagon, reaching some of the largest economies on the continent, more countries are going to follow suit, especially if we have data. And that's why I feel that more governments need to document this data, showing that openness leads to increase in economic activities and GDP, etc. Because if I can visit an economy without any restriction, that's why Rwanda has the kind of massive investment. I talked to a lot of people are investing in Rwanda, buying properties in Rwanda, and that's because they don't need visas to go visit their properties. Ease of doing business is there, etc. So that's what we will begin to become the norm, because guess what, people? It's not just the US that's going to cut aid to Africa or other parts of the world. Europe will follow suit. The US is a leader in terms of global dynamics, right? The US is going to have data from doing that and saving in that. Look at how many people are homeless. I live in Europe. I live in Marseille. Sometimes I walk around. There's so many homeless people in Marseille,
they need to attend to their
in Canada, in Brazil, around the world. Focus. Let them. It's good. Aid is good. It helps a lot. And I'm also a giver. My family, we do a lot of giving. And aid is important to address the problems of the least vulnerable. But when aid becomes a competition to trade, what that means is, as an entrepreneur, it's difficult to compete with grants in the market. So imagine you develop a viable solution in a country, in a jurisdiction, and another company coming from, let's say, the US has aid. It does that project for 1 year. Your business suffers. Maybe you run out of business because then the other competitor has aid. By the time that aid is over, then there's no company to continue it. There's no leverage. So I think what the continent needs are investments. Investment to the continent to replace aid, right? And that is going to also require African countries to structure, right?
Sure.
So a massive trend and wave of opportunities coming on the continent where countries that are able to capture that investment, that trade that replaces aid, are going to be at the forefront. And there's no other way. Trade is integration without the infrastructure and the travels, right? That's why today my African headquarters is in Nairobi. Why? Because it's very easy to go to Kenya. There are many flights, Kenyan Airways. Many companies are also thinking about Ethiopia now with a lot of, the reason why a lot of companies were not before was because there was a lot of indigenization, right? More of the country had a lot of nationalistic policies, which are changing now. Now we have a stock exchange, which is quite open globally. So that is beginning to change. So more companies we set up. In Zanzibar, you have more than 80 airline companies operating from here.
Wow.
Very easy to actually set up a company. And if I travel from Zanzibar to Paris in 9 hours, 10 hours, I'm in Paris, right? You can just do that overnight and you're in Paris the next day. People do this every week. Same thing for many economies, right? So I think it's going to happen. We have a lot of billions and billions of dollars of investment in rail infrastructure. Now Dar es Salaam, Tanzania and Burundi have signed more than $3 billion investment to extend the rail track coming from Dar es Salaam that is going to Burundi and then enter into DRC, right? So this is the way to allow for increased trade when goods can move first. Secondly, also people can move. And for people to move, then we need to reduce the barriers to immigration and moving, etc. And that's what's starting to happen. And that's going to continue to increase. And there's no better time to be on the continent than now. So I see the trend is positively progressing.
Amazing. That's very good to hear. For those who would be saying, being bothered about, I was speaking with someone I think 2 years ago, and we're considering an investment, and the person had been long gone from the continent for decades, and he said, you go to take this money to Africa and we can't find you anymore. You know, and we cannot repatriate the funds. You know, so some people they say capital goes where it thinks is safe for it. You know, so people are concerned about the safety of their investment. People are concerned about the strength of the not just infrastructure. Now you're talking about the legislative frameworks that supports, you know, capital influx, the strength of the local laws. You know, people are concerned about those things. So in terms of diversification of their wealth, you know, it's a good thing to want to consider to bring it home. But the question is, how do you ensure that it's safe where you direct it to, whether it's Zanzibar or Nigeria or wherever across the continent? So yes, I'd like you to speak to that.
Yes, absolutely. It's an important point because when you make investment, you have to also protect the investment.
Absolutely.
And laws, regulations, international treaties protect the investments. So the investment framework within a country becomes a very strong driver. And that's what has made the difference for Rwanda, for instance, and a couple of other jurisdictions. We talk about Kenya, which did very well for quite a while. And also a few other markets that have been on the front burner. It's really them working on ease of doing business, regulations, and also the interoperability of their currency, of their banking system, financing system, etc. Having a very predictable economic policies, and welcoming for foreign investment. For instance, being able to create a company and own it 100%. It's the case in Zanzibar. You need to make a minimum investment, but you can own your company 100%. It's the same in Burundi. Actually, Burundi is overwhelmingly open for business. I was quite surprised. And in December, we had the opportunity with my co-founder to be invited by the president of Burundi, attending the International Investors Summit, made some announcements, and it was really great to know about the regulations. So I think what is lacking most of the times, I think for countries like Burundi, countries like that don't seem to be very open for business from the outside, is really knowledge. And perception is everything in investment. Yes. If you go to Paris, for instance, people that are visiting Paris for the first time, most of them say I was quite shocked. I expected more because I've heard about a lot of things about Paris, etc. You know, the good things about Paris. I love Paris. I do go to Paris quite often. But it doesn't mean that there are also no downsides in Paris. The same thing in you can go to Toronto, for instance. You go to DTA downtown Toronto, you see things and you're like, okay, every market, every place has the upsides, the downsides. The challenge we have sometimes on the continent is that we promote a lot, or the media, we allow the mainstream media to decide the fate of our economies, which should not be the case.
No one can tell your story better than
exactly. So you see countries that have invested in media, like Rwanda, having sponsoring Arsenal and all of that. It has brought more revenues than.
True.
And that's what France did to promote Paris. They sponsored movies, themes. That's how Hollywood, right? The United States, Hollywood, right? So Emily Bag, exactly, in Paris, Emily in Paris. So that's the way we actually also ought to do, and to attract investment. And for the topic around how do we protect investments? Yes, it's true. A lot of international treaties, depending a lot on stable legal frameworks in the countries, but also being selective on where one establishes their presence on the continent. And before setting up our headquarters in Nairobi, we had done a lot of comparative analysis based on our operations to choose Nairobi, but also we ensured that we ring-fenced the presence in every country, having subsidiaries. So there's with good lawyers and financial advisors, they can actually help with the structure. But there are companies that are here. I know companies here that would never make the same amount of revenues or turnover as being elsewhere. And many of these are foreign companies. So the opportunities on the continent, yes, and they're able to protect their wealth, they're able to repatriate the funds. It's really about how this is done. When it's done properly and according to laws and compliance, I believe that it's really able to yield much more than many of the places we consider stable. And I use the word consider because the perception, is really about the perception. And if we work on that perception and we do business on the continent, we see that we can have a Fumba town, for instance, which you can have in Germany. I mean, the families established this beautiful project could have thought about doing this in Europe, but they consider the way they're looking at the trajectory of Europe in terms of population growth, the opportunities, etc., and looked at this and decided to do it here because there are opportunities here, and this has been very successful. And anyone can do the same in any sector and also protect their investment.
Beautiful. To still take that further, in terms of, I know during the briefing with CPS Africa, Sebastian and his team, they mentioned that with an investment of $100,000, you can also qualify to be a resident of Tanzania. You know, you want to speak to that for people who might want to. For some people, that might be important for them. You know, to get that kind of residency in this part of the world. You know, so how does that work really? And also, I understand that this is a free trade zone. You know, what's the impact of that on taxes and all of that?
Okay. Yes, it's actually a great opportunity that the government has put in place, and thanks to developers like CPS that have done tremendous work in making the government also have the leverage to do that, the backdrop really to do that. In terms of the residence permits, it's a good thing for a lot of families that want to move here. Absolutely, because to live here without on a visa is restrictive.
Sure.
Yes. So, and that investment of $100,000 is 25% of the investment one needs to make as a company and investor. Yeah. So for an investor in sectors outside tourism and hospitality, it has to be $500,000 investment across a period of around 36 months with a business plan. There's sort of guidelines to assess that. But what they've done is to say we now qualify a property investor as an investor, which is a very strong, because $100,000, I'm sure a lot of viewers will agree that in many jurisdictions this does not guarantee even anything. You can't even it doesn't move the needle, right? You can't even invest that in many jurisdictions as a foreigner because it's not considered much. Right. So, but Tanzania, Zanzibar particularly has made a lot of strides in making investors at home, no matter the level of their investment. And it's the same in Burundi, it's the same in many jurisdictions. And getting residence permits and bringing families, dependents, having dependent visas, etc., or residents is an easy process here, as
Amazing.
long as they follow the guidelines and compliance. The advisors and lawyers that actually can help with this process, and immigration experts, it's easy to do. And that process is just renewed every 2 years, just for the government to make sure that someone doesn't come invest and then sells it and keeps having the rest. It can be in perpetuity. Absolutely, yes. So I think it's a good thing for a lot of investors, and the fact that there are a lot of foreigners already living here means that it works, and people are being able to have this to travel around, because with that you can go around East Africa with all the benefits of
that comes with it.
You can go to Kenya without needing a visa. You can go to Burundi. You can go to the DRC, the EAC countries without needing a visa, which is a very good thing.
Amazing. So, in summary, an investment of $100,000 in a real estate property gets you a residence.
Makes you eligible for residence, and you just pay the residence fees, and then you can get a residence. Yes, with the document.
And if you want to come in with a business, an investment of $500,000.
That's correct.
And broken into, I think you mentioned a couple tranches or something.
Yes.
Like you don't need to bring it.
You don't need to bring it all at once. Yes. You just need to show in the business plan that this will be invested within a duration. Most times it's around 36 months.
Okay.
And it doesn't necessarily need to be investment in money.
Beautiful.
Or finance, or actually investment in cash. It can also be in equipment, operating costs. So I feel that this is one of the most open markets in the world. Where in many countries can you have operating costs as an investment, which means you can actually say your time, feasibility studies is an investment and it's allowed, right? So once structured correctly, there are ways to actually structure it correctly. So I think it's an amazing opportunity for investors that are open-minded and looking for opportunities on the continent to consider Zanzibar. Actually, Zanzibar is open for business.
Beautiful. An ambassador, not just Africa, but you do an amazing job promoting Zanzibar. Last question. I think there's also a bigger concern. I know the opportunities abound, but you have a continent that is growing so fast. You have, there's several data that speaks to the fact that Africa is the youngest population currently. Nigeria, you have over 60-70% under 20, and in a couple years or decades, it's said that Nigeria will be one of the biggest countries population-wise in the world. Tanzania as well, under 19, So you have a continent where there are lots of young people, and I'm not sure that there are commensurate opportunities for all of them. So which means that it could be, as much as it's an opportunity, it's also a ticking time bomb, really. So the question then is, because we also have to look at, the grand scheme of things. If I'm coming to invest, I need to be sure that the investment will be safe over the years, and that comes from having something for everyone, basically. So the question is, how can the continent convert this human population to human capital?
Absolutely. This is something that had been on my mind for now close to 20 years. There was a report written by the British Council, which is a good reference on this point, talking about it's called the next generation report. That said that Africa sits on a threshold, and what could be the greatest opportunity could also become the greatest, as you mentioned, time bomb.
Absolutely.
It's really a question of what is done about it. It's really a question of what is done about it, and also being in the human resource and staffing industry, realize that this also presents an opportunity for export of talent. It's really a question of what is done about it, and how bridges are created between cross continent, right? So what governments can do is invest in high-tech internet. And I really do appreciate infrastructure. The Nigerian government is doing quite a lot with I saw signing of a couple of agreements for 5G broadband, etc. This is what is needed. Because if somebody in a village in Utueke or Utupo or somewhere in Nigeria, these are communities in Nigeria or in Gweben, or wherever, right? Can service clients
across
in New Jersey,
Atlantic.
across the Atlantic. What this does what the
can
government then
work,
needs to do,
can support
can
clients,
support
can
clients,
earn
can
from
earn.
them. Yeah.
And look at what's going on with our skit makers today,
Yeah.
with those doing comedy
Yes.
shows on
Yes.
TikTok and Instagram. I love that.
Viewership from across the world.
Will Tanzania do that? Will Burundi do that? And based on that, define your economy strategy for investment, because not every economy will do that.
True.
That's the truth. Not every economy will be. So it's now being in the right place.
Yeah.
We're countries that are forward thinking, that understand that opportunity is one that is time-based and time-bound, and we're in a global economy. We're in a global economy.
True.
There's no folding hands.
It's one word now.
It's one word now. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said, man. Well said. Final words. I think that this has been a very insightful session, but final words from you, John.
I really do appreciate you coming Unity with your wife. So really great to see both of you, and I like more people really to come experience it. And it's a bold move to leave your companies for a whole week and decide to come travel all the way. That's really, those are the steps I was talking about earlier that people need to come see. If you're in the diaspora, come see that this is open for business. Don't look at what only we see on social media. Sometimes it may not be as glamorous, or not be as you would not tell the story, the real story on the ground, the full story. Come see for yourself. Tanzania is open for business, as many other markets. Zanzibar is open for business. Nigeria is open for business. Burundi is open for business. The African continent is open for business. Come and do business on the continent, but first come visit to see for yourself. Feel at home. Make decisions based on what experience you get when you come and what you see on the ground, and not what you're just told. But even by your advisors sometimes, right? It's good to come see on the ground, and this is open for business, and it's good to have more people come to see for themselves, and based on that make decisions. Yes,
absolutely. I mean, I'm already missing Zanzibar. The weather is amazing. It's almost minus 15 or going to minus 20 in Canada where we live, and I'm already missing this beautiful weather. I've been just like this over the last few days with multiple jackets and all of that. So it's beautiful out here, and I'm hoping that many people get to, try it out first before making the big leap, and you then make your decision. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, bro.
Thank you so much.
Bro.
Till next time.
See you next time.